Hello boys and girls, this is the 8th week for the live videos. This week we are going to do more of the rubbings with leaves. There are other things that you could do rubbings with, just about anything that has texture, but we're going to still focus, since it's fall, on rubbings, on leaf rubbings. I want you to remember that in the modules I have videos. I'd like you to watch the video. It's another video about warm and cool colors. That is a concept that we're working on, helping you to remember what warm and cool colors are and what warm and cool colors do. Pardon me. Also, in the module, for module 8, you will see that there's a quiz. We always have a quiz. That's just to have you show the principal that you're doing the projects. But what you need to do for Mrs. Wagner for grades is you need to ask one of the adults that you live with, ask them to take a photograph of your finished artwork and send it to my school email. If you go to the school website, you should be able to find Mrs. Wagner's email. It's just my name, lynn.wagner, and the rest of the school's email. It's at agasd.org, but that's Mrs. Wagner's email. Just send me photos of your artwork because I have to have that for your grade. And the 9 weeks is coming very soon, so I need grades. Thank you. Let's begin. Remember last week we worked with just a little piece of crayon. I broke it so that's about the size of an inch. I like an inch. It's the right size. It's not too big, and it's not too small that I can't hold it. We are going to use the same leaves that I used before because this is what I have in my yard. I have hydrangeas. I really like hydrangeas because I like the really deep, the veins are really deep, and I like these because the maples, because of the nice outline. The shapes around the leaf itself is really interesting. And the one around the hydrangeas is nice because it has a little jagged edges. Remember, when you're doing the rubbings, the leaves go under the paper. Think about where you want to place them. I'm going to put that one right there. I never put anything perfectly straight. I kind of always have them in different angles. I'm going to look again, see kind of where I have it. I'm using black because I want to be able to see the edges easy. So I do it very, very lightly. I rub very light. Then a little bit darker once I see where the edges are. I rub a little closer to the stem. Add a little bit more pressure there so that when I'm rubbing, you'll get a little more of the veining showing. Let's try one of the maples. I'm going to bring it up here. Maybe have some of it go off the page. Bring that down a little bit. And again, very lightly rub. So I get the outline. Where is it? There it's... Sometimes if you can't find it, lift up the paper like I just did to be able to find the edge a little bit. Because I was going off the leaf up here. Very good. Some nice lines. I'll do a little leaf facing the opposite direction. Same maple leaf, but smaller. Very lightly again. Get the edges of the leaf so I can see what I've got. See where it goes. It goes over this direction. Doing around the edges real good so I can see the edge. That way I know where to paint to. I know where my edges of my leaf is. Now I'm going to do a larger hydrangea leaf over here. I think I'm going to tip it so it goes up. I can almost see this one. It's such a dark leaf going around the edges. I want to get a good rubbing on the edge. You can see the jagged edges of that leaf. And then the center one and some of the really deep ones. Okay. I think I might just bring this up. I'll just put some of the point of that leaf, like it's pointing somewhere, just the tip. Make it a little interesting. Make the shapes a little interesting. Okay, I like that one. I don't want to put too much wax because remember, wax is kind of repels the water, and we're using watercolors. So I don't want to have too much wax on there, otherwise the paint will just sit on top of the leaf and it won't absorb into the paper. Take a look and see how far up. When we add paint to it, we're gonna have to think about doing it in like a little bit at a time. Add a little bit of paint, let it absorb into the paper again because we're using wax. But it's every time you do something different, you learn something new. So that one went off the page, and I need to do something up in that upper right-hand corner. I think I'm gonna do this again, but I'll come in this direction. Not all the way in. I don't want them to overlap. I don't want to have it so it's confusing. Now it looks like it's overlapping, but it's going into that section where I wasn't quite sure where the leaf stopped. So remember, you're allowed to lift up the paper to look and see where you put that leaf, especially if somebody's distracting you, dog or cat come and visit you while you're doing it. Confuses you. Or you're like Mrs. Wagner, I just forget. I start thinking about something else and I forget where I put the darn leaf. Okay, there you go. I used black because I wanted to be able to have a little more contrast. Now I'm going to add some color. I'm going to do warm colors. Warm colors come towards you. You'll see that in the video. It'll explain it a little bit again. But I'm going to use warm colors on the leaves because I want them to come towards me. And I'm going to start, you see how you can see that the paint is kind of sitting on the top of the paper? I'm going to have to move it because if I leave it there, it's just going to sit and make the paper get a little bit warped. And again, this is not watercolor paper. Watercolor paper is super expensive, and I don't have the money to give you guys watercolor paper. So that would be not fair if I use watercolor paper and you were like, how does her painting look like that and mine looks like this? So I use the same stuff. So there's yellow. I might wait a little bit and maybe add a little bit more, maybe some orange later. I need to add a little more water. My watercolors are dried out, so I need to add a little bit of water to each color that I'm going to use. Again, I'm just using the warm colors right now, and then I can go back and use them. I'm going to do some orange on this leaf. I'll move the paper over. Not a whole lot, and I'm just going to move it. Keep it moving on the page. Doesn't take much paint, especially since there's so much wax. Okay. I think I'll do just red on this one for right now. Okay, let's try little orange down here. I don't want all the yellows in one side and all the oranges on another side. That's why I'm changing it up. So I have orange over here, and I put a little orange in the bottom corner. Try to think about where you want to put your colors. I added a little extra, so it's a little bit darker there. I think that looks very pretty. I'm gonna add yellow to this one. I'm gonna definitely leave a little bit more on this one too, just like I did on that one. I'll leave it a little bit darker. Artists are always learning as they're working. I enjoyed doing the wax resist type stuff, and using wax crayons to do the rubbings is kind of necessary, but it definitely gives you a little bit of a problem. Like you could see the paint doesn't want to absorb. Every time you do something, you learn a little bit something new. Oh, I like this. Adding a little bit of yellow. Now I didn't add water because my paints are still a little bit damp. Sometimes when you use watercolors, you could do wet on wet. So your paper is wet and use a really wet brush. Well, since this is not watercolor paper, I'm just gonna use the wet paint. My brush is a little bit dry, so it's gonna put down a little more color. That's pretty. And now I'm gonna wash my brush, and I'm wiping a little bit of the extra water off my brush so it drips back into the container. I might add a little bit of orange to this one. This is my first one. I don't like that. That's a little too dark. Add a little water. I'm gonna thin it out a little bit because I don't want it to be that dark. Orange in my Crayola watercolor paints, from the ones we have at school, the orange is incredibly dark. It doesn't, it can really cover a lot of space just with a tiny bit. Maybe we'll add a tiny bit of red. Now I'll add the same amount of red and it won't cover as much area. See how it's not quite as intense of a color, not quite as dark. For some reason, the orange is incredibly dark. I'm trying to make these look realistic. You know, the leaves that you see on your trees that are falling off your trees and landing in beautiful piles of colored leaves have a little bit of red sometimes on the tips, then a little bit more orange on some of them. So I'm gonna try to make them look realistic. I'm gonna do this one up here because I kind of lost some of the tip here, so there. That looks pretty. I think those two are done. I'm gonna add a little more yellow, I think, to this one in the corner because it doesn't have a whole lot of orange. Leave that dark. We'll see if that stays dark as it dries. Okay, I'm gonna add a little more orange to this because it didn't get very dark at all. I think I like this. It'll just go from dark to add a little yellow on that side. There, that's pretty. Maybe an orange and spread it out on this one. So it's not just yellow. I move the, pardon me, if I move the paint quick on a wet leaf that hasn't dried yet, it won't stick. Now I'm going to turn it around so you can still see it. And I'll finish these two leaves. I'm going to first do yellow. I think you should always start with your lighter color because you could always add the darker color. Sometimes if you have a dark color and it really covers it, like say that orange, that's quite intense, you may not be able to see the yellow if you wanted to add yellow. Okay, I'm going to add a little orange to this so it blends. This is looking pretty. See how dark that orange is? Holy smokes. I'm going to move a little bit of yellow in there. I think watercolors are fun because it makes you look like you know what you're doing, even if you're just brand new and just starting to use them. Your first time of painting with them, you look like an expert. I started down here with the red and brought it up, and as it stayed darker down here because I kind of wore off the paint, the brush, you know, kind of lost all the paint down at the bottom edge, and then it kind of looks like it's fading. That looks nice. I think I'm done with the warm colors. So our leaves are warm colors. Remember, warm colors come towards you. I will not make you sit and watch me do all the background color because that will be the same things, but with the cool colors. Remember, our cool colors are purple, blue, green. And if you wanted to add a little bit of black to the colors, if they're too light, you can always add black to it, but watch black, it's a little intense. I'm gonna wet my paints. Always wet them first. And remember, you're using the water that's just tinted with the paint. I think I'm gonna add a little blue. And I'm gonna move it around a lot because I really don't wanna have it in a puddle. This paper is pretty fragile. I'm gonna have to hold my paper so it doesn't move around. Kind of like that little bit of purple in there. Do a little more blue. I think the only part that's a little difficult is just watching where the paint goes while you're getting close to the leaves. But take your time. It's not a race. Art takes time. If you don't get this done in one day, you take a break. You could take a break after you do the leaves and come back next week and finish it. But this is what you'll do with your background. If you enjoy it and you want to keep going, please do. We have time, especially if you're not in class. In class, you only have 45 minutes, and a lot of that time nowadays is Mrs. Wagner passing out supplies. So you may get more done being that you're doing it at home. So you're going to continue painting the background all around the leaves, every leaf that you have. Take your time, enjoy it. Remember to watch the video. It gives you a little more insight into the warm and cool colors. When you're actually doing it, you can see that the cool colors stay in the background. That orange and yellow and red are popping out at you. You need to take the quiz. We always have to take the quiz so that your principals know you're working. And I need a photograph of your finished work so that I can grade it. Thank you, boys and girls, and enjoy yourselves.